My connecting flight had been cancelled, and the airline rebooked me for the next morning. I found myself wandering into the dimly lit corridor near Gate 19, dragging my small carry-on behind me. The place was deserted. The few other stranded passengers had found places to sleep closer to the main concourse, but I wanted quiet. The hum of the air conditioners was constant, the vending machines humming like a low mechanical heartbeat. My phone battery was dying, so I switched it to airplane mode to save what little charge I had left. I was scrolling through old photos when I heard it. Daniel, my entire body tensed. It was faint, like someone had whispered directly into my ear. I turned quickly, expecting to see someone nearby, but the terminal was empty. Every row of seats was vacant. I shook my head, blaming exhaustion. I'd been awake for nearly 22 hours. And airports at night have a strange way of making you feel disconnected from reality. But a few minutes later, I heard it again. This time, softer. Daniel, this time. It came from behind the empty counter at Gate 19. I walked slowly toward the counter, heart pounding against my ribs, half expecting to find an employee crouched down playing some kind of prank. Nothing. The entire counter was abandoned, monitors dark, boarding pass printer unplugged. I stood there for a moment, trying to listen past the hum of the terminal lights. Nothing but silence. I turned to go back to my seat when the intercom above me crackled faintly. Daniel boarding now Gate 19. I froze. I looked up at the departure board, and my stomach dropped. Gate 19 had no departures until 6:15 a.m. The system shouldn't have been active at all. I stepped back slowly, scanning the hall, my senses on high alert. No footsteps, no voices, no employees anywhere. I decided to leave Gate 19 and move toward the food court area, but before I could take more than a few steps, I heard it again. This time, from the intercom right above my head. Daniel, come closer. The door to the jet bridge was slightly ajar. My first thought was that an employee had forgotten to lock it, but another part of me felt like this was intentional. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The air was heavy and stale, a faint chemical smell mixed with something wet and metallic, like blood that had been sitting too long. I took slow steps forward. The glass walls along the walkway showed nothing but the dark outside world, illuminated faintly by distant runway lights. Then I saw it. A shape, standing at the far end of the jet bridge, still and quiet. I squinted, trying to make sense of it. Was it a person? A worker? The intercom overhead popped with static again, and the same whisper slid through the crackling distortion. Closer. I froze. The silhouette shifted slightly, just enough to confirm it wasn't my imagination. That was enough for me. I turned, bolted out of the jet bridge, and didn't stop running until I reached the main terminal. I stayed in the food court until sunrise, surrounded by strangers, just listening to the comforting noise of clattering trays and early morning conversations. When the first employees started arriving, I flagged one down and asked why there were intercom announcements so late at night. She gave me a strange look and shook her head. The system shuts off after midnight, she said. Maintenance was running checks all night. No announcements were made. I nodded slowly, trying to mask the unease on my face. A few hours later, boarding for my flight was called. As I walked toward the gate, I glanced down the long hallway toward Gate 19 one last time. The jet bridge door was closed now, but standing behind the glass, barely visible in the dim reflection, was a figure, perfectly still, perfectly silent, watching. My connecting flight had been canceled at the last minute, and the airline rebooked me for an early morning departure. I had 6 hours to kill. Most people set up camp around the food court or the cluster of charging stations near Terminal B, but I hate crowds when I'm tired. So I wandered toward the quieter end of Terminal C. That's how I ended up near Gate 19. The first thing I noticed was how empty it was compared to the rest of the airport. A handful of dim fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, one of them flickering weakly near the far end of the hall. The vending machines gave off a soft mechanical hum, and the only other sound was the low drone of the air conditioning. I settled into one of the stiff plastic chairs, dropped my bag at my feet, and pulled out my phone. With barely any battery left, I set it to airplane mode and scrolled through photos to pass the time. That's when I heard it. A whisper, so faint, I almost thought I imagined it. Daniel, my whole body froze. I sat up straight, pulling one earbud out and glancing around. N01. The rows of seats around me were empty. The nearest person was a janitor at the far end of the terminal, mopping absent-mindedly while listening to something on his phone. I shook my head, trying to brush it off as fatigue. I'd been awake for nearly 20 hours, and airports are strange after midnight. They're designed to feel alive and bustling, but when they're quiet, they feel hollow in an unnatural way. I leaned back, shut my eyes, and tried to relax. Daniel, this time, I knew I hadn't imagined it. I snapped my head up. The voice came from the direction of Gate 19's boarding counter. Slowly, I stood, scanning the dim hallway. Empty. That's when I noticed the departure board overhead. Gate 19 had no flights scheduled until 6:15 a.m. The boarding counter shouldn't have been staffed. And yet, somehow, someone had said my name. I walked toward the counter at Gate 19, convinced someone had to be hiding behind it. Maybe an employee, working late, maybe a traveler playing a stupid joke. But when I leaned over the counter, the area behind it was dark and empty. No open laptops, no paperwork, no signs of anyone having been there recently. The silence felt heavier now. I turned to walk back to my seat when the intercom above me crackled faintly. Daniel boarding now Gate 19. My entire body locked up. I glanced at the departure board again. No flights until morning. The system shouldn't have been active. I grabbed my bag and started walking back toward the main concourse where there were more people. But as I reached the end of the hall, the speakers above me hissed again. Daniel, come closer. I froze in the middle of the walkway. The voice was distorted, like it was running through a broken radio, but it was clear enough that I couldn't mistake what it said. I looked back at Gate 19, my stomach tightening, and then, just faintly, I heard it again, not from the intercom this time, but behind the closed door to the jet bridge. Daniel? I hesitated at the jet bridge door, knowing full well it shouldn't have been open. But my curiosity, or maybe something deeper, pushed me forward. I placed my hand on the handle, and it turned easily. No resistance. The moment I stepped inside, the air changed. It was warmer, heavier. The faint smell of jet fuel hung in the space, mixed with something damp and metallic, like wet coins and rust. The walkway was dark, lit only by weak emergency strips along the floor. I walked slowly, each footstep echoing louder than it should have in the narrow corridor. Then I froze. At the far end of the glass, something shifted. It wasn't a person, not exactly, but a shape tall, slightly hunched, standing perfectly still, half hidden in the darkness where the jet bridge met the plane door. I squinted, trying to make sense of it, but before I could take another step, the intercom above me hissed with static, and a low voice whispered directly into my ear, closer. My chest tightened, my legs locked up, and then the shadow moved. That was enough. I turned and bolted out of the jet bridge, slamming the door behind me so hard it rattled the frame. I didn't stop running until I reached the food court. I stayed in the food court until sunrise, sitting as close to other people as I could. The sound of trays clattering, phones buzzing, and employees setting up for the day was strangely comforting after what I'd experienced. When the first gate agents arrived, I approached one and asked about the announcements overnight. She frowned at me and shook her head. The intercom system in Terminal C's been down since midnight, she said. They were doing maintenance all night. Nobody made any announcements. I forced a nod, pretending to understand, but inside, my stomach dropped. A few hours later, my flight began boarding. I walked down the terminal toward Gate 22, trying to keep my focus straight ahead, but just before I turned the corner, I glanced back at Gate 19. The door to the jet bridge was shut tight now, but in the glass reflection, just for a moment, I saw a figure standing perfectly still, head tilted, watching me. I blinked, and it was gone. And yet, even as I boarded my plane, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't done with Gate 19. My connecting flight out of Denver was delayed by 6 hours. Midnight came and went, and I was stranded in an airport I'd never been to before. Most travelers had staked out spots in the food court, curling up with blankets and jackets, but I couldn't relax there. The constant noise made me restless. I decided to stretch my legs and explore, walking past the main concourse into a quieter wing of the airport. The lighting was dimmer there, one of the overhead bulbs flickering faintly as I passed. Cleaning staff moved silently between gates, pushing carts full of mops and supplies. That's when I noticed the sign "IT" hung from the ceiling above a narrow hallway, pointing left. Gate E7. I frowned. That didn't sound right. When I'd landed earlier, I remembered passing the big terminal map, and there had only been A, B, C, and D concourses. I figured I must have misremembered, so I followed the sign anyway, curious to find a quieter area where I could wait out the night. The hallway was long and silent, the kind of silence where your own footsteps feel too loud. As I walked, I passed several unmarked doors, some leading to staff-only storage rooms, others completely sealed shut with peeling paint around their edges. Finally, the corridor opened up into a small waiting area. The digital departure board overhead flickered softly, showing arrivals and departures for nearby gates, but when I scanned the list, my confusion deepened. There was no Gate E7 listed at all. I sat down in one of the cracked leather seats near the gate, glancing at the flickering departure board again. Nothing. No scheduled departures. No arrivals. The vending machines against the far wall looked ancient, with faded stickers advertising sodas that hadn't been sold in years. The air smelled faintly damp, like a room that hadn't been cleaned in a long time, which didn't make sense for an airport. I decided to leave. The whole place felt off. I turned around and started back toward the hallway, walking briskly now, telling myself I was just tired. But as I moved, something felt wrong. The hallway was darker than before, though I hadn't noticed the lights dimming when I came in. The air felt cooler, heavy. I passed 4 doors on the left and 3 on the right, all unmarked, but I could have sworn there had only been 2 when I'd entered. I sped up, trying to shake the strange sense of disorientation creeping up my spine. Then, I turned the final corner expecting to see the main concourse and food court and froze. I was back at Gate E7. I stared, heart pounding in my chest, convinced I had taken a wrong turn. So I tried again, choosing a different hallway this time, following the signs carefully, counting doors, memorizing turns. 10 minutes later, I stepped into the same small waiting area. Gate E7. Again, I started checking the doors one by one, desperate to find another way out. The first one was locked. The second to by the third door. I thought I heard something faint voices, low and urgent, as if several people were talking just out of earshot. I pressed my ear to the cold metal surface, straining to make sense of it, but I couldn't pick out words. It sounded wrong somehow, like the whispers were layered on top of each other, overlapping, as if several recordings were playing at once. I tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the whispering stopped. The silence that followed was crushing, like the whole building was holding its breath. I backed away slowly, and that's when I heard another sound, the creak of a door opening somewhere behind me. I turned sharply, heart hammering, and saw one of the unmarked doors further down the hall had cracked open. A cold draft spilled into the corridor, carrying with it the smell of damp concrete and something faintly metallic, like rust or old blood. And then, from inside the darkness, beyond the door, a single word emerged in a low, rasping whisper. "Daniel." I ran, my footsteps echoing sharply against the cold tile, carrying through the hollow corridor louder than they should have. Every turn looked the same. Every wall, every light, every unmarked door. Finally, up ahead, I spotted something new. A set of glass sliding doors glowing faintly with bright white light on the other side. I sprinted toward them, lungs burning, convinced I was finally back in the main terminal. The doors opened automatically with a soft hiss, and I stumbled through, nearly collapsing against the nearest wall. The sound of voices hit me like a wave, travelers chatting, children crying, rolling suitcases clattering across the floor. I spun around, expecting to see the hallway it just escaped from, but it was gone. Behind me was just a solid wall, clean white tiles, no sign of a hallway, no sign of a missing concourse. Heart still racing, I stumbled over to a nearby terminal map on the wall, tracing my finger across the layout until I found my location. There was no Terminal E, there was no Gate E7, and yet, somewhere behind that wall, I could still swear I heard distant whispering. I travel for work far more than I'd like to admit, but this night at Redfield International Airport stands apart from every other dot. It was a Tuesday, close to midnight, when I found myself stranded after my connecting flight was delayed. I was supposed to be on my way home after 3 exhausting days of client meetings. Instead, I sat in an eerily quiet Terminal C, staring at the flickering departure board that still showed my flight to Chicago as on time, despite the fact that it was already 11:57 p.m. and boarding should have started half an hour ago. At first, I thought nothing of it. Delays happen, but as I glanced around, I noticed there were only 7 or 8 other people in the terminal, each sitting unnaturally still, eyes fixed somewhere distant. The PA system crackled randomly every few minutes, but no announcements came through. No gate agents, no staff, no security walking past. Just the hum of the overhead lights and the muffled whir of the vending machines. I remember texting my coworker, stuck at Redfield. Terminal's dead. Starting to feel like a ghost town. I stared at the message for a while. No response. When I got up to stretch my legs, my shoes squeaked faintly against the polished floor, the sound unnervingly loud against the silence. I glanced toward the large glass windows looking out over the runways. Not a single plane in sight. No baggage carts. No ground crew. Nothing. Still, I tried to shake off the unease. Maybe the late hour explained it. Maybe. I decided to walk over to Gate C17, where my flight was supposed to depart. That's when I noticed something strange. Every single departure board showed different times for the same flight. The one near the bathroom said 12:15 a.m. The one across from security said 1:05 a.m. The one by my gate still insisted it was 11:30 p.m. I laughed nervously under my breath and checked my watch, but somehow even that gave me no comfort. It said 12:42 a.m. I went back to my seat and tried to distract myself with emails, but my phone screen kept glitching, flickering every few seconds as if it were struggling to connect. A man sitting across from me caught my eye. He was dressed in business casual, a cheap suit jacket draped over his carry-on. He hadn't moved once since I first arrived, and I noticed his eyes didn't seem to blink. I thought maybe he was sleeping upright, but when I shifted in my chair, his gaze shifted too, following me without moving his head. 2 rows over, a young woman scrolled on her phone, except her screen wasn't on. Completely black, yet her thumb kept swiping as if she were reading something. A shiver ran through me, but I told myself I was overthinking it. Sleep deprivation plays tricks on the brain. Then the PA system crackled again, louder this time. I perked up, waiting for the usual monotone announcement. Instead, what came through was garbled, almost distorted, like a voice underwater. Flight 17 boarding now, boarding now. The words repeated in an unnatural loop. And yet, the passengers didn't react at all. I grabbed my bag and walked quickly to the counter at Gate C17, expecting to see a staff member. There was no one there. The terminal was still empty, yet the lights above the counter blinked steadily, like they were signaling for me specifically. I glanced over my shoulder, and that's when I noticed the man in the cheap suit. He was still seated where I'd seen him minutes ago, but now his head was tilted completely backward, mouth open unnaturally wide, as though frozen mid-scream. I froze, looked away, looked back. His head was upright again, staring at me. That's when I grabbed my bag and decided I wasn't waiting any longer. I walked fast, keeping my eyes low, toward the nearest security checkpoint. I didn't care about my flight anymore. I just wanted out. The signs above pointed to exit, but when I turned the corner, I ended up right back in front of Gate C17. I thought maybe I took the wrong turn, so I went left this time, past the Starbucks and the Little Hudson newsstand. My shoes tapped faster against the tiles, breath coming shallow. Another corner, another hallway. I stopped dead in my tracks, Gate C17. Again, the departure board above it now read 2:03 a.m. I checked my phone. 2:03 a.m. exactly. I walked back the other way, jogging now, past the empty waiting areas and silent vending machines. But no matter which direction I went, no matter which hallway I turned into, I always ended up at Gate C17. The other passengers were still there. The man in the cheap suit. The woman scrolling nothing. A family of 4 sitting 2 rows behind them, each staring straight ahead, unmoving. The PA system erupted again. The same warped voice. Boarding now, final call, boarding now, except this time the words didn't match the movement of anyone's lips. And when I looked up at the windows, I finally noticed something I should have seen hours ago. Outside, the tarmac was pitch black. No runway lights, no floodlights, no city lights in the distance, just emptiness. And then, the lights inside the terminal began flickering. I don't know why, but something deep inside me told me not to stay by Gate C17 any longer. I started running, not caring where, until I saw a narrow, dimly lit corridor marked Gate C19. The sign looked newer than everything else around it, almost glowing faintly. I slowed down as I reached the hallway. It stretched unnaturally far, lined with windows on one side. Through them, I saw nothing but a starless void where the city should have been. Halfway down the corridor, the PA system spoke again. But this time, it was clear. Passenger Daniel Courier gate is now ready. Please proceed immediately. That's my name. I turned back to see if anyone else heard it. But the terminal was silent. I hesitated, every instinct screaming not to go further. And yet, I stepped forward, heart hammering. The corridor opened into a massive, unmarked gate, Gate C19, but there were no seats, no counters, no people. Just a single open doorway, leading into absolute blackness. The PA system whispered one last time. Final call. I took a step toward the doorway, and the moment my foot crossed the threshold, I woke up. I was sitting in the same chair at Gate C17. My watch read 11:57 p.m. The man in the cheap suit was still across from me. The woman was still scrolling her dead phone. The departure board still said, on time. And then, the PA system crackled. Flight 17 boarding now, boarding now.